12 p.m. Eastern, and at 7 p.m. Eastern, a conversation on Russian election interference with Senate Intelligence Committee Vice Chair Mark Warner. And we're live to Phoenix now for more debate coverage. U.S. Senate contenders, Democrat Kyrsten Sinema debating Republican Representative Martha McSally, vying for that seat currently held by retiring Republican Senator Jeff Flake. Live coverage now from Phoenix.
Good evening and welcome to this special election 2018 debate between U.S. Senate candidates Republican Congresswoman Martha McSally and Democratic Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema. This is the only live debate between these two candidates. It's a joint effort brought to you by Arizona PBS and the Arizona Republic. I'm Ted Simons, host and managing editor of Arizona Horizon.
And I'm Maria Paletta, political reporter for the Arizona Republic and azcentral.com. We're broadcasting to you live from the studios at Arizona PBS and the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at the downtown campus of Arizona State University. Tonight's debate is also being live streamed on azpbs.org and azcentral.com.
Now, the ground rules for the debate are as follows. Once we ask a candidate a question, they will have 90 seconds to answer without interruption. The other candidate then gets 45 seconds for a rebuttal, again, without interruption.
We will then have up to 2 minutes for an open discussion on that topic. At the end of the debate, each candidate will have 1 minute for closing statements.
Topics were chosen by journalists from Arizona PBS and the Arizona Republic, which includes azcentral.com. Questions from the public are also included. Let's now meet the candidates.
Martha McSally is a Republican and has represented Arizona in Congressional District 2 since 2014. She is a native of Rhode Island and was the first woman to fly in combat in Iraq.
Kyrsten Sinema is a Democrat and has represented Arizona's 9th Congressional District since 2012. Before that, she served in both the Arizona House and Senate. She is an Arizona native born in Tucson.
Earlier, we drew numbers to see who gets the first question, and that honor goes to Congresswoman Martha McSally.
Congresswoman McSally, you were once a critic of President Trump. You now are a more vocal supporter of the president. The question is, what changed?
Well, nothing changed, and I take issue with your premise. I was representing my district back in 2016. I was fighting for Southern Arizonans, and I was running my own campaign. And I've never endorsed anyone for anything, whether president or dog catcher. And so I just continued with that path. But he's now in office and is the president of the United States. And we have this historic opportunity to move America in a new direction. And we've done that since he's been in office. We've cut taxes. We've rolled back regulations. We're working to rebuild our military. We're working to secure our border. So there's so many opportunities that we have in front of us. And I built a good relationship with the president. The first time I was invited over there, I talked to him about the A-10 Warthog, the plane that I flew, and how we saved it. The last administration tried to, put it in the boneyard, but how important it was to keep it flying because it protects our troops. And I talked to him right then into becoming an A-10 fan. I'm working with this administration related to sanctuary cities and MS-13 gangs. There's so many things that we have to work on. So what's happened is, because of the Republican-led Senate and the House working with this president, we really see more opportunity from people in Arizona. And I'm going to keep working with him. In fact, I'm going to host him at Luke Air Force Base on Friday, the base that Kyrsten Sinema advocated to shut down when she was first running for office. So this is really important, and I'm going to keep working with him when I'm in the Senate.
45 seconds rebuttal. Congresswoman.
Well, thank you, and it's an honor to be here with you tonight. And Martha, it's good to see you. We're going to have a good conversation tonight on the issues that matter most to Arizona families. Rising health care costs, protecting Medicare and Social Security, and keeping our country safe and secure. But there'll be some differences that you'll see clear in this evening. I've been laser focused on the issues that matter most to Arizona families and everyday Arizonans, while Martha has chosen to run a campaign based on nasty smears and false attacks. And I expect you'll see more of that this evening. But Arizonans know that I've never been afraid to stand alone to do what's right. And I'll always work with anyone to get things done in Arizona. And that's the approach I've taken in the United States Congress.
Congresswoman McSally, did you want to respond to any part of that?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, we've heard these talking points a lot already. Just talking specifically about the campaigns, I had over $15 million so far of attack ads against me from Kyrsten Sinema and her allies. In fact, in the primary, over $2 million was spent against me by an organization that was her previous political consultant was a part of. And it was a bit of a sneak attack, because when we found out George Soros and Chuck Schumer were actually behind him, we're now up to $15 million. So what everyday Arizonans really care about are job opportunities. And we've been able to work on that and provide more opportunities for them. We have more jobs right now, more jobs opening than people are looking for jobs. And this is really providing more future and more opportunities for people in Arizona. And we're going to keep working on that. Everyday Arizonans can't afford their health care because Obamacare has failed. And we need to make sure that we provide affordable, available health care for them.
Congresswoman Sinema, I asked Congresswoman McSally regarding what had changed. What has changed with you? Many remember you as being more liberal than you are now, back when you were in the state legislature. Now you vote more often than not with President Trump. What changed?
Well, Ted, as Arizonans know, I have been lucky and privileged to serve this great state, both in the state legislature and, of course, now in Congress for the last 6 years. And over the years, I'm proud to say that I have taken the time to learn and grow and occasionally even change my opinion. When I served in the U.S. Congress for my first several terms with Congressman Salmon, he and I worked together on a variety of issues, including keeping our country safe and growing businesses in Arizona and protecting trade. So over time, I think it makes sense for individuals who are willing to learn and to grow. The difference, I think, between Martha's approach and my approach is that Martha opposed many of these issues before running for Senate and then changed her mind very quickly. I've been serving for many years in the United States Congress and before that in the legislature, and have over time been able to grow and become even better at my job serving Arizonans. And folks know in Arizona, I'll always put their interests first, never party. So as you mentioned, Ted, I often do vote against my own party. And that's something I think Arizonans depend on and are proud of. They want an independent voice in the United States Congress. And what they want in the United States Senate is someone they know who stands up for them, not just does what party leaders tell them to do.
Have you changed? I asked you that. It's the first question. Congresswoman Sinema says you've changed over the years.
Absolutely not. I left my home at the age of 18 and joined the military. I lost my dad when I was 12, and I was looking for opportunities to get a good education as the youngest of 5 kids. So I chose to serve in uniform for 26 years. I put my life on the line for our country. I flew 325 combat hours, protecting our freedoms and our way of life. I'm now serving in Congress, and I've been leading on the issues of supporting our military, securing the border, and providing more economic opportunity for people. And I've been consistently doing that, both serving in Congress and now running for the Senate. My record is clear and it's consistent, unlike my opponent.
Real quickly, you mentioned that you were going to appear with President Trump this week.
Yeah.
Are you proud of the way President Trump has conducted himself in office?
Look, President Trump ran for president one time and won, and he's a disruptor. He went to D.C. to shake things up, and he's doing that, and we're seeing the results from that. Not a lot of people wanted to tackle the challenges of North Korea getting access to a nuclear weapon that could hold American city hostage. Not a lot of people wanted to address updating bad trade agreements so that it would help Americans. And so he's disrupting things, for sure, in Washington, D.C., but providing more opportunities for Americans and Arizonans while ensuring that we're safe and secure from the threats that are out there.
So you're proud of the way President Trump has behaved in office?
I am proud that he has gone to the White House and he is leading our country in the right direction. I am proud to be working with him to provide more opportunities and to make sure we keep our country safe. He didn't need to be doing this. I've gotten to know him over the last year and a half, and he loves America, and he is fighting for Americans every single day, and I'm going to keep working with him to provide more opportunities for all of us.
Ted, I think this is an area where we do have a difference of opinion. I believe Arizonans deserve a senator who just calls the balls and the strikes and doesn't just always agree with their party leaders. And so Martha has a 98% voting record with her party and with her president, which I think demonstrates that she's not willing to do what's right for Arizona if the president's wrong on an issue. And I'll give you an example. Recently, the president instituted very harsh tariffs and has started a trade war. And that is devastating for Arizona's businesses and for our agricultural community. Thanks to these tariffs, right now, cotton bushels are selling for 25% less than they were before, and that damages our cotton industry. In addition, we've seen dairy farms, 5 of which have been sold because of these harmful tariffs. And I've met with business leaders here in Arizona, Blockwise and Tempe, that creates tools for medical device manufacturing, and they're spending 20% more on taxes on aluminum and steel. And perhaps worst of all, in Lumberyard Brewing, which is a family brewery in Flagstaff, thanks to these aluminum tariffs, they're going to have to pay more for cans of beer. That's something I think we should all be able to agree on, that beer shouldn't cost more. And this is an area of difference between us, because Martha has said that the small businesses who will be hurt by these tariffs are collateral damage. But I don't think that the 97% of businesses in our economy, which are small businesses, should ever be considered collateral damage. They're the lifeblood of our economy. So I believe it's our duty to stand up against the president when he's doing something wrong, but join with him when he's doing something right, like working for veterans. So we should be calling the balls and the strikes, not just blindly following what party leaders tell you to do.
Congresswoman McSally.
Well, let me first say 97% voting with lowering taxes and rolling back regulations and providing more opportunities for our military to be able to keep us safe. I am proud to be able to do that. Kyrsten Sinema has voted a little over 60%, but here's some key votes that she wasn't with us. I voted to cut your taxes, providing the opportunity for about $2,000 per Arizona family, more money in their pocket instead of going to Washington, D.C. And we're seeing, because of that our economy is on fire right now. I voted for the Farm Bill. She's talking about farmers. She voted against the Farm Bill in a partisan move, because that's what Nancy Pelosi decided to tell them all to do. There's another bill that I hope we get to related to immigration, to secure the border, to end family separation. It was a really important compromise bill that I led on and that President Trump supported. And given the opportunity, Kyrsten Sinema voted no. So 60% with the agenda that is showing more opportunities for everybody is a failing grade in any school. And Arizonans want to be with the agenda that we are working on with President Trump, but we got to keep it going, because the alternative right now is her party. If Chuck Schumer is in charge, it's going to be open borders. It's going to be government-run health care and abolishing ICE and everything that goes with that. So there's a lot at stake with this election right now, and people need to make sure that they know the full records of our background. And I hope we can talk about tariffs later, because I believe in free and fair trade.
We will.
You touched on several topics we'll get into more in depth later this evening. Moving on to the second question, Congresswoman Sinema. The Senate confirmation hearings for Brett Kavanaugh were extremely charged. If you'd been a sitting senator at the time, how would you have voted and why?
You know, Maria, I was incredibly disappointed in the way that the Senate behaved during this confirmation hearing. It was a circus, and it was not befitting the importance of a decision like this. I was disappointed in people in both parties in the United States Senate. I was also disappointed that within hours of President Trump nominating Judge Kavanaugh to the bench, that politicians in both parties tweeted out their fervent opposition or solid support for someone we knew very little about. Martha chose to endorse Judge Kavanaugh right out of the gate. I said I wanted to reserve judgment, because this decision is so important. It's a lifetime appointment, and I believe it's one of the Senate's greatest duties. So I recommended that individuals take time to learn about Judge Kavanaugh's record, to read his decisions, to understand his approach to jurisprudence. Because a candidate who's going to the Supreme Court shouldn't be evaluated on whether or not he or she is conservative or liberal. They should be evaluated based on character and integrity and their approach to deciding the law without bias or favor. I was disappointed in the method that the Senate handled this, and I felt like it really denigrated the work that the Senate should do. As a United States Senator, what I pledge to do is to evaluate each nominee based on his or her qualifications and character and approach to jurisprudence, not based on political leanings.
Your rebuttal, Congresswoman McSally.
I would have voted yes on now Justice Kavanaugh. He's highly qualified, and he has shown, I think, what we need to be looking at for judges and justices, which is that they're not going to be activists, but they're actually going to interpret the Constitution and the laws that we make in Congress the way that they were intended to. And if you look what happened there and what the Democrats did, to Dr. Ford, and then to Brett Kavanaugh and his family. It was disgusting. Look, I'm a survivor of sexual abuse myself. She clearly had been through a trauma, and what happened to her by holding her name, which she wanted anonymous, and then not even knowing that they offered to fly out to California, it was disgusting. We have seen the mob rule in Washington, D.C., and in the end, Arizonans wanted a yes vote on Justice Kavanaugh. I can be for survivors as one myself and for Justice Kavanaugh. And my opponent showed that the mob rule and the anti-Kavanaugh don't want to have someone like him on the Supreme Court. She would have voted no.
That's our 45 seconds for rebuttal. Congresswoman Sinema, you can respond, please.
Well, I think that what Martha's mistaking here is the partisan exercise that was engaged in. The reality is that senators should be evaluating each of these nominees based on their approach to judicial decisions, not based on these partisan attacks. So Martha used language just now that was incredibly partisan to describe this process, and so did many sitting senators. But I believe the Senate is better than that. The Senate should not engage in that type of behavior. And it was disappointing to see. If I'm elected as a United States Senator, Arizonans can count on me to evaluate each nominee thoroughly and carefully without political bias.
Using the criteria that you just outlined, I know you said earlier you had signaled that you wanted to reserve judgment, wait until you were able to review that record and the other things you mentioned. Now that you have had the time to do that, would you have voted yes or no?
I had several concerns with Justice Kavanaugh. First, I was concerned about the partisan nature of some of his comments during his second testimony. And I was also concerned that he appears to have lied under oath with some of the questions that were asked in that testimony. Prior to that, I also had questions that if I were a senator would have wanted to sit down and ask him. For instance, his approach to privacy. Here in Arizona, we take our privacy rights very seriously. And Judge Kavanaugh had, as a circuit court judge, ruled on a number of decisions concerning the privacy of Arizonans. And this is an area where Martha and I have a difference. Martha supported a bill in the United States Congress, actually introduced by Senator Flake, that would allow internet companies to sell your private data, including social security numbers of children. If that were a case to go to a court, I would want to ensure that a justice would protect the Fourth Amendment privacy rights of Americans.
We need to get a response to that, but before we do, we still haven't gotten an answer. We've received no answer from you as yet.
Ultimately, I would have voted no on Justice Kavanaugh, and I did put out a statement saying as such. I was disappointed that the Senate wouldn't release the results of the FBI report. After saying they were going to take the time to do an investigation, they didn't share that with the Arizona public, and we deserve the transparency to see what the results of that investigation were. So given the fact that I didn't have the same information the United States senators had, the decision I would have made based on lying under oath would have been to vote no.
Did you put our privacy at risk, voting to let anyone buy or sell private information online because you received money from internet company PACs? Did you do that?
Ted, what are you even talking about? Of course I did not do that. And this has already been debunked. I mean, this is, again, what this campaign is all about, coming out with these lies and attacks that are fear tactics. I'm actually a privacy hound. I mean, my friends and family and staff make fun of me because I won't use location services on my phone, and when someone gave me a Fitbit, I gave it back to them. I am tirelessly advocating for our privacy. This is an absolute lie. We wanted to make sure that the FTC and the FCC basically had a level playing field, and that privacy was protected for everybody, whether you're a content manager or whether you're an internet service provider. That's what that was all about. It was a processy thing that, as usual, they are taking totally out of context in order to scare people.
Well, the facts are very clear. We had a vote on this bill. I voted no, and Martha voted yes, along with Senator Flake, and the bill became law. And it jeopardizes the security of children's Social Security information. I've been working to try and help protect children from the threat of Social Security fraud and theft. So earlier this year, I partnered with a Republican colleague of mine, Carlos Curbelo of Florida, and we passed legislation that actually provides greater protections for children who are targets or victims of Social Security fraud. Working together, we can actually solve these problems and keep our children safe and secure and protect their privacy rights. But unfortunately, on this piece of legislation, Martha voted yes.
I really think we need to move on to some other important topics, because literally this has been debunked and she's just taking up time. But if you want to talk about protecting children, then let's make sure we don't take donations from Backpage.com. Kyrsten Sinema took $53,000 from Backpage.com, owners, and it wasn't until she was put under pressure while they were under investigation that she finally was shamed into giving it back. And when she was in the Arizona legislature, when they were trying to hold Johns accountable for going after victims of child sex trafficking, she was advocating for the Johns, saying that the girls 12 and 13-year-olds, looked older than her. Look, I'm not making this stuff up. These are her words, and I'd ask people to go to therealcinema.com to find out the facts, because this makeover has been pretty impressive, but people deserve to know what her record is, what her past is, and what the facts are and the things she's advocated for.
Do you honestly believe she was protecting adult men who are molesting children?
I would ask people to go watch the whole video. She was a defense attorney, so I guess that's where it comes from.
So you believe that?
But in that discussion, and then later on in 2010, in another hearing, based on her concerns for age 15, 16, and 17-year-olds, the Johns were basically in that bill allowed to have an affirmative defense that said, I didn't know they were 15, 16, or 17 years old. And that's the bill that was changed when she says she voted on it. But in 2010, watch the tape, therealcinema.com. Peggy Bilstein is there tirelessly advocating for children because she's seen the scourge. And in an argument with Representative Sinema, because she was asking, well, what's changed? Why can't we, just keep it as it is? And Peggy's passionately saying it's because they're getting off with less than a traffic ticket. So again, I just ask the voters, there's so much at stake here. Please do the research, go to therealcinema.com, and you can see for yourself.
Respond, please.
Well, what Martha's leaving out is I actually voted yes on both of those bills.
After they were changed.
And worked hand in hand with my colleague, Republican Adam Driggs, also an attorney, to make sure that this legislation toughened the penalties against these bad guys who engage in this horrible activity. And something that's important for folks to know about me is that this has been my entire career. My first job was as a rape crisis counselor working at a domestic violence shelter. And since then, I've committed my life and career to protecting women and children from abuse and from assault. And my record is strong. In 2013, when we passed the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act to give better tools to law enforcement to crack down on these kinds of heinous crimes, I led that effort. But just last month, when a vote came up to reauthorize this for the long term, Martha voted no to give a long-term reauthorization to the Violence Against Women Act. So I would encourage folks to go take a look at the votes. And as we heard this morning in the Arizona Republic, this is ridiculous. We ask people to just go look at our vote record because it speaks for itself.
Yes, it does speak for itself, and that is absolutely a lie. That's like a procedural vote that she's pulled a few out there that has nothing to do with reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act. So please don't believe that.
Going back to Congresswoman Sinema and the original question about Brett Kavanaugh, one of the main sticking points on both sides has been discussion about whether Justice Kavanaugh would support overturning Roe v. Wade. Where do you stand on that issue?
I believe important decisions such as that should be made between a woman, her family, and her doctor, free from government interference.
And where do you stand on that?
I am pro-life, and I have a very strong pro-life record.
So you would support overturning Roe v. Wade?
I'm focused when it comes to judges on how they interpret the Constitution and how they interpret the laws that we make. It's not a particular litmus test, but I have a very strong pro-life record.
So you would support the overturning of Roe v. Wade?
I would support appointing justices. I mean, this has nothing to do with what Congress is working on or the Senate. I would support appointing justices that are looking independently at the Constitution and at the laws that we make, and that they will have a good decision-making process based on that.
All right. Let's move on to health care. Congresswoman McSally, how much should government be involved in health care, especially when it concerns folks that find it difficult to get health care, specifically those with pre-existing conditions? What is the government's role?
Well, thanks, Ted, for the opportunity again to debunk another attack from my opponent. I voted to protect people with pre-existing conditions, to make sure insurance companies were forced to give them health care, had no caps on insurance, and could not cancel it. That is just a flat-out lie. We cannot go back to where we were before Obamacare, where people were one diagnosis away from going bankrupt because they could not get access to health care. And so, although it was trying to fix it, Obamacare was the wrong approach. It's $1 trillion in taxes. It's robbing Medicare by $716 billion. It's mandates and penalties that were really intended to go after those who were falling through the cracks, who didn't get health care from their employer or Medicare or Medicaid. It ends up it's about 7% of people, and they're falling through the cracks. They're still falling through the cracks, Ted, because I met an entrepreneur this last week who decided to start her own business, who has pre-existing conditions, but because of Obamacare and because of skyrocketing costs, she has no coverage right now. More people paid a penalty last year than actually bought insurance on the Obamacare exchanges. So we have to address the issue, and we've got to make sure we protect people with pre-existing conditions, but the Obamacare model has failed. We moved forward with an approach that gives people tax credits and gives them options to shop around, more small business support, to have association health plans, more opportunity for people to give to health savings accounts that still can provide affordable, available health insurance for them, which isn't working right now under Obamacare. So we've got to protect it. At the federal level, there should be a part, but it's best managed at the state as well, where there's more options for them to be innovative, because what works in California is not what works in Arizona.
Rebuttal, please.
Well, I'm so glad we're talking about health care, because it is the number one issue that I hear from folks, both on the campaign trail as I travel the state and in my office in the United States Congress. Arizonans are very worried that they will lose coverage for those with pre-existing health conditions. Nearly 3 million Arizonans live with pre-existing health conditions. One example is a woman named Leslie. She lives in Scottsdale. She was diagnosed with diabetes when she was in high school, and she's been taking 5 insulin shots a day for 47 years. But when Martha voted last year to repeal existing law, it would have eliminated the protections for people who live with pre-existing conditions in our country today. She also voted to repeal that same protection in 2015. So the reality is that Arizonans are worried about losing access to this critical coverage, and Martha voted to take that protection away.
That is just a flat-out lie. Again, these are just classic fear tactics. If you turn on a TV all over the country right now, the Democrats have nothing to run on, and so they're choosing to play with fear. I voted to protect people with pre-existing conditions. And as we were moving forward and nothing was moving through the Senate related to this issue, 14 of 15 counties in Arizona, there was only one choice last year. That is not a choice. And the premiums have gone up over 100% year to year. There's so many people right now with pre-existing conditions that can't get access to health care because the Obamacare model doesn't work. But when things came to a standstill and we were watching these individuals still not able to get access to health insurance, I sat down with my Democrat colleagues in the Problem Solvers Caucus, and we sat down to see if there's any way we can find some common ground to help these people get access to health insurance, and we came up with a plan. There was me and a couple of our Democrat colleagues out there with a whiteboard in my office. We know what we can disagree on, but is there something we can find to help stabilize this market as it was collapsing? And we came up with a plan that 23 Democrats and Republicans, or at least the majority of the group, agreed to. So we showed that we could break through the gridlock, solve the problem, and actually help people get the insurance that they deserve and get the care that they deserve with the conditions that they have in their family.
Again, government's place in health care.
Well, one thing I think all Americans can agree on is we cannot go back to a time when people couldn't get coverage when they had pre-existing health conditions. So while Martha talks about a working group and part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which I am a proud member of, the reality is that we took the vote. And during the vote, Martha voted to repeal these protections. And they are the protections that Arizonans count on every day. That same vote also took away protections for people ages 50 to 64 and would have allowed states to begin charging them as much as 5 times more for their coverage. That's just not fair. And finally, that piece of legislation that she voted for would have increased premiums by as much as $1,500 per year per family. So while we all can agree that our healthcare system is broken and needs to be fixed, The solutions that Martha has voted for actually make the system worse and hurt Arizonans. But she's avoided talking about this issue during the campaign because she knows that her vote hurts Arizonans and has instead chosen to just lob attacks against me on other issues.
Your response?
That is just an outright lie. Again, I voted to protect people with pre-existing conditions, to ensure that insurance companies cannot deny someone coverage if they have a pre-existing condition. And when it comes to this age tax they've made up, the only person in this Senate campaign who's voted to cut your taxes is me. And so, you know, age 50 to 64, calling them older Americans, by the way, I am in that age group, so I take offense to that. What we were trying to do is make sure that premiums come down for everybody, that there's options for everyone to be able to get access to affordable, available care. And that's not what Obamacare has done. As we were working on our bill, and I was concerned about the tax credit, specifically for age 50 to 64, I personally lobbied to make sure an additional $90 billion was added to the bill for an additional $2,000 of tax credits for everybody age 50 to 64. That was included in the bill because as we move away from the failures of Obamacare towards something that's more options for people to get access to insurance, it's more affordable. It's gone up over 300% in Arizona since Obamacare. Then these options are a better path. Give people choice. Let them make decisions between them and their families and buy the insurance that fits their needs.
We mentioned earlier that we do have some questions submitted by Arizonans, submitted by the public for you. We would like both of you to answer this one. Where do you stand on strengthening Social Security and Medicare for senior citizens?
Well, I'm so glad you've asked this question because this is personal for me. My grandmother, who was widowed at a young age in Tucson, raised 3 young kids on her own, and she worked at Furr's Cafeteria. When she retired years ago, Social Security and Medicare were all that she had to depend on. And so I'm committed to protecting Social Security and Medicare for current and for future generations. I oppose privatization schemes such as those that Martha has supported. Martha has repeatedly said she wants to privatize Social Security, and I oppose that. I think that's the wrong answer for our seniors. I also oppose raising the retirement age, which Martha supports. I believe after a lifetime of hard work, it is not fair to ask someone to work even more to just get the benefits that they've worked so hard for and that they earned. And finally, I believe that turning Medicare into a voucher system is risky and allows Wall Street to make decisions about what our future health care looks like. In fact, it's such a risky proposal that even the Wall Street Journal said that turning Medicare into a voucher system would end Medicare as we know it. So this is an area of great difference between Martha and I do not support making these cuts, but just last year, Martha voted to cut $500 billion from Medicare. My own grandma depends on Medicare and Social Security every day, and the constituents that I represent, and that will hope to represent the United States Senate, will depend on these benefits that they've earned. It's our duty to protect them for future generations.
You cannot make this up. I mean, these are just more lies. Our seniors have been working their whole lives, and they have been saving for retirement, and they've been paying into Medicare and Social Security, and they deserve to have the benefits that they had paid into. We must protect Medicare and Social Security for those that are at retirement and the next generations to come. So the only person who has voted to actually cut or supported cutting Medicare in this Senate race is Obamacare, cutting $700 billion from Medicare, robbing it for its one-size-fits-all Washington, D.C. approach. So that's the real difference here. But you know what? The Medicare Trust Fund and the Social Security Trust Fund are doing better right now because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. More people are working, more people are paying into it, and that's going to actually sustain it. But you know, if we do nothing for the next generation, by 2026, the Medicare Trust Fund is going to dry up, and by 2034, the Social Security one. So why don't we sit down together, Kyrsten, and find some bipartisan solutions in order to protect this for the next generation, instead of using the typical fear tactics we've seen for many years against Republicans on this issue? It's a lie.
Do you want to privatize Social Security?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That is a flat-out lie. Again, we've seen these attacks for many, many years. Democrats don't have anything to run on. They're basically, you know, Republicans are throwing Granny over the cliff. I mean, the voters are not going to believe this. We've got to make sure that we come up with a bipartisan way for us to strengthen it and preserve it for the next generation while protecting the seniors.
Do you want to turn Medicare into a private voucher system?
Absolutely not, Ted. What I want to do is strengthen Medicare for us, for the seniors that are there and the next generations. I totally support Medicare Advantage, which is very popular in Arizona. We've got so many seniors that want to have options for them to shop around while we preserve Medicare as we know it. I'll tell you, the only thing that's going to end Medicare as we know it is the agenda of her party. If the Democrats take over in the Senate and the House, they're going to want to push through a government-run health care, which literally will end Medicare as we know it. And some of these votes she's talking about, by the way, the Wall Street Journal in 2011, I was serving overseas at the time. I wasn't even in Congress. You can't make this stuff up.
There seems to be a disconnect here. She's saying she does not want to privatize Social Security and she doesn't want vouchers for Medicare. You buying that?
Well, Martha said those things, and I think this is just a pattern that we've seen through this campaign, unfortunately, that Martha has changed her opinions very rapidly when she decided to run for the United States Senate and has shown that she's willing to do and say anything to get elected. I would just encourage voters to take a look at what she has said. She has offered many times that she supports privatizing Social Security, has said that she wants to raise the retirement age, and has said that she wants to turn Medicare into a voucher system. And then if you actually take a look at the actual votes, she did vote to cut $500 billion from Medicare just last year. So take a look at the vote records.
Moving on to our next topic, immigration and border security. I know, Congresswoman Sinema, you've described the proposed border wall as an 18th century solution to a 21st century problem. Would you support allocating funding for a border wall if it included a path to citizenship for Dreamers?
I'm so glad you've asked that question, Maria, because we actually voted on an issue similar to this just last year. And I voted for $1.5 billion of border security, which included funding for President Trump's border wall. I'm fine with a physical barrier being part of a total solution, but I believe that simply funding for a border wall is not sufficient because the dangers we have around border security are too great to simply allow for an 18th century solution to a 21st century problem. That's why I've introduced legislation called the USA Act. It's a bipartisan bill that would increase funding for smart border technology, increased boots on the ground, drones, night vision cameras, and increased technology so we can actually interdict the dangerous cartels such as Sinaloa and MS-13 who are bringing in drugs, but also smuggling in humans and abusing those folks, sometimes trapping them in drop houses and victimizing them. So we've got to combine our efforts, not just with a physical barrier, but also with smart technology. Our USA Act also provides a path to citizenship for Dreamers, who are young people who came to this country through no fault of their own and deserve a path to citizenship. They've served our country in our military, they've gone to our colleges and schools, and they are American in everything but name. This is a difference between Martha and I. In 2012, when she first ran for Congress, she opposed a path to citizenship for Dreamers. In 2015, she supported it. But then she decided to run for Senate, and now she opposes it again. So we actually don't know where Martha stands on issues of immigration.
Well, you know exactly where I stand. I have been leading the effort to secure the border. I represent fifth-generation ranchers in 80 miles of the border that are tired of the cartels that are trafficking through their ranches and into our communities. It's created an opioid crisis that's killing 116 Americans every single day, and the policies of the past have failed. Because of my leadership, I am the Border Security Subcommittee Chair, never given to a freshman before and never anyone from Arizona. And look, the reality is the border ranchers like Jim Chilton and John Ladd and all of them down there on the border, they're endorsing me because they know I'm the one who's going to lead to keep us safe. The Vice President, or the Border Patrol Council that represents 15,000 Border Patrol agents, they often endorse Democrats. They looked at Kyrsten's record, 6 years in Congress and mine at 4, and they decided that they were going to endorse me. These are the agents who every single day are down on the line, putting their lives on the line to keep us safe. So don't listen to the talk. I've been leading on the issue, and she had the opportunity to vote for a bill for $38 billion of border security, ending family separation, moving us towards a merit-based system, and providing a legislative solution on DACA. Kyrsten says she'll work with anybody, but when it came down to it, all the Democrats, including Kyrsten, voted no on this very important compromise bill. President Trump supported it. She was given the opportunity to vote yes, and she voted no.
Respond, please.
Well, I've bucked my party over the years to do what's right for our border. You know, folks on the East Coast and from far away don't understand the issues of the border like we do. But I was born and raised in Tucson and have been living around the border for most of my life. So this is real for us in Arizona. And that's why when opportunities came to work across the aisle to do what's right for our state, I was willing to buck my party. So I've supported a $10 billion increase for our Customs and Border Patrol agents, a $5 billion increase for ICE agents, and have voted for legislation such as Kate's Law and the Gang Removal Act, which allow us to crack down harder on these bad guys who are committing felonies and hurting people in our community. The reality is that this is an issue that I've been working on my entire career. It shouldn't be a partisan issue, and it's not a partisan issue. Only when some people choose to make it partisan, as Martha has done, does this become a fight in the United States Congress.
Congresswoman, did you pull your name off the Recognizing America's Children Act earlier this year, which targets dreamers and supports dreamers? You were for that. All of a sudden, you pulled your name off of that. What was that all about?
So I've consistently shown that I was willing to do something on DACA, but we have to secure our border, and we have to address the root causes of why we have a DACA population in the first place to make sure that we don't make the mistakes of the past. And so as we were working on this issue, when the president kicked DACA to Congress appropriately, me and a couple of other Republicans sat in a room for many, many hours and came up with legislation that would solve the issue, secure the border, and address the issue of DACA. And when it was brought up to a vote, Kyrsten Sinema voted no. We then had another compromise bill, which was $25 billion for border security. The president still supported it, and a pathway to citizenship for DACA. But it closed the loopholes that the cartels are taking advantage of right now. And we were in the midst of this discussion. It looked like some people were going to force a vote on just a standalone bill related to DACA. I wanted to make sure it was clear. We've got to secure our border. I'm willing to do something on DACA, but we've got to secure the border and close these loopholes that the cartels are trafficking people into our communities and the opioid crisis that's killing Arizonans every single day. I jumped in and led on the issue, and Kyrsten was given the opportunity to vote yes or no. $25 billion for border security in the second bill, plus a pathway to citizenship for DACA and ending family separation. She chose to vote no, along with Nancy Pelosi.
Real quickly, do you support a partial government shutdown to fund a border wall?
Look, I don't support shutdowns for anything. I've been in the military. I've seen the devastating results of government shutdowns. Washington, D.C. needs to be able to get their act together, and they need to be able to fund the government and fund our military. But, you know, given that opportunity last year when there was a lot of pressure from Kyrsten's base to address this issue, she voted with Chuck Schumer to shut down the government, choosing illegal immigrants over our troops in a partisan play. So she talks a good game about working with anybody, but when given the opportunity to actually solve this issue, she left our troops hanging.
Well, Martha continues to talk about very partisan bills and very partisan activities. But the reality is that during this discussion of talking about immigration, how to solve our problem, we do have bipartisan legislation. The bill you mentioned, Ted, that Martha removed her name from, I'm a co-sponsor of that legislation. I was actually the first Democrat in the country to join with Congressman Carlos Curbelo of Miami to sponsor that legislation. And I co-sponsored, an original co-sponsor of a bill called the USA Act, which I mentioned earlier, which both secures our border and provides a path to citizenship for dreamers. Martha has chosen not to support that bipartisan legislation and instead has chosen to support only legislation supported by one political party. And I believe Arizona deserves better. And so when there was an opportunity for folks to get very partisan, which they did, and they do on a regular basis, I was part of the bipartisan group trying to solve that problem. We offered our bill, the USA Act, and unfortunately, partisan leaders in both parties rejected our proposal.
Congresswoman McSally, you mentioned family separations at the border. Did you support the Trump administration's so-called zero tolerance policy at the time? Are there any circumstances under which you're okay with families being separated that way?
This administration, because of the laws that are on the books, was put into this situation where they had to either enforce the law or keep families together. I think we need to do both. And my bill and the second bill that Kyrsten voted no on would have ended family separation. It would have provided an opportunity for there to be due process and keep families together while they were processed for their illegal entry or processed for asylum. We also were increasing funding for immigration judges so we could end this catch and release. Look, the reality is the cartels know right now that if you show up with a kid, you're going to be let go. I got a call this weekend from the Yuma mayor saying he was panicked that 200 or more people every single day were going to be just let go into Yuma, and they didn't have the capacity because they showed up with a kid, and we're seeing the activity increase every single week. As they cross the border illegally, they know they're going to be let go. There's also cases the Border Patrol are telling us about where people are not the child of the person who's bringing them in, and this is increasing the incentive to traffic children across the border. So my bill fixed this legislatively and had the opportunity for us to enforce the law and keep families together. And that was the right approach. You know, she can talk about different bills she got on, but the one she had a chance to vote on, the one that was a compromise that President Trump supported, it ended family separation, fixed DACA, and secured the border. Look, Kyrsten voted to support sanctuary cities. She voted to cut ICE. She's very dangerous on this issue, and we need to make sure we secure our border.
That's 90 seconds. Rebuttal, please.
Well, Martha shared a lot of information just now that's frankly just not accurate. The reality is that the Trump administration made a decision to separate families at the border in an attempt to try and provide deterrence. But that is the wrong decision. Separating families is not reflective of American values. We can both secure our border and keep our country safe and secure without taking children away from their parents. There are ways to do this quite easily by monitoring families and moving them through the process of adjudication more quickly. But Martha has chosen to move down a road, again, very partisan. As she says, we had compromise legislation. I think she means compromise with herself, because there was no bipartisanship in any of this discussion, which is incredibly disappointing for Arizonans.
And the reason there is no bipartisanship is because Nancy Pelosi decided that Democrats were not going to join in. You think about it. President Trump supported this bill, and he took a lot of flack from it from both directions. Securing the border, closing these loopholes, moving towards a merit-based immigration system, and providing a path to citizenship for DACA. I mean, that is the definition of a compromise on this issue. Look, most Arizonans agree we got to secure the border, end family separation, and address these other issues. Our bill was a confidence-building measure that was also addressing the very real security issues of the cartels that are trafficking through these communities. This is not just hypothetical. Jim Chilton has 4 strands of barbed wire at the international boundary. You saw it yourself when you went down there. We've got to secure the border now.
Was family separation, as your opponent says, a choice that the president could have made to keep these families together, as opposed to what you say is the law where he had no choice?
So the law on the books is to enforce the law. And so the administration was put in an untenable situation where you either enforce the law or keep families together. I think we can all agree families shouldn't be separated. But I think we can also agree we need to enforce the law. Border security is national security. And the definition of a country is that we control who is coming in and out of our borders.
So enforcing the law superseded keeping families together.
Congress needs to fix this, Ted. It's our job to fix the law. And so that's what we've been doing, and that's what I've been leading on. And Kyrsten voted no on both these bills that would end family separation.
The law is the law.
This is a very big difference of opinion between the two of us. Martha has chosen to be an apologist and support anything that her party's lead puts forward, whereas I've been ranked the 3rd most independent member of Congress. I'm also been ranked the 3rd most bipartisan member of Congress. And it's because I'm willing to stand up against my party to do what's right. And when it comes to the issue of border security, I worked with Congressman Matt Salmon and others in the delegation to increase the employees at the Customs and Border Patrol in Arizona by 170 members. I also have been endorsed by the Customs and Border Protection agents in Arizona and nationwide. And the reason is because I've shown a willingness to stand up and do what's right, even when others are doing what their party tells them to do. So while Martha is trying to find excuses or apologies for this behavior. The reality is we should just call the balls and the strikes. When the president's doing something right, support him. When he's doing something wrong, oppose it.
Let's go to the economy right now. Yeah. And Congresswoman, we just heard today that the budget deficit has grown $113 billion in fiscal year 18. That's up 17% or 3.9% of the GDP. Many are saying it's because of the tax cuts. You support the tax cuts. Do you also support deficit spending?
Well, the revenue is actually up this year, Ted, so that's actually not accurate. It's not because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which I proudly voted for, to cut the taxes of Arizona hardworking families, to make sure they have more money in their paycheck for providing for rent or their mortgage or saving for college or whatever it is they want to do to fix their car. I was excited and privileged to be able to vote for that. The revenue is actually up right now. The economy is doing so well. We are at a historic 3.8% unemployment rate, the lowest for Hispanic unemployment rate in history, African American employment rate as well. There is so much opportunity for people. We still have to get some people retrained and into the jobs that are out there, but revenue is coming in at a higher rate this year than last year. Now we have a spending problem is the issue. Now we supported and I fought for making sure we had the biggest military increase in our spending over last year and this year, and I hope we get to the military here soon before we wrap up because there's some really important issues. But what we've got to do is address the other spending. Every family, every small business has to sit down and identify where they can find ways to address cutting their spending. While we're seeing the economy is on fire right now, we're seeing American jobs that are coming home, and we're going to keep it going because that's what America is all about.
Rebuttal, please.
Well, I voted no on that tax bill last year for several reasons. First, it increased our deficit by what we thought would be $1.9 trillion. Turns out from that report this morning, it could even be higher. But more importantly for Arizonans and their everyday lives, the bill also jeopardizes spending from Medicare and Social Security. And after that bill was passed, many of Martha's colleagues have said, well, as soon as the election's done, we're just going to go back and cut Medicare and Social Security. That's not right. It is wrong to try and balance your budget on the backs of seniors who've worked so hard their entire lives for these benefits. My last concern about that legislation was it didn't provide permanency of tax cuts for middle-class families or for small businesses. But last month, the House took a vote to increase tax cuts for those communities, and I voted yes, because small businesses and individuals in the middle class deserve a tax cut.
Please.
This is just another example for Kyrsten where she was against something before she was for it. Thanks to President Trump, Governor Ducey, and the Republican-led Senate and House, our economy is doing amazing. 4.2% GDP growth. Again, every single day, jobs are opening around Arizona. I talk to small business owners who are investing in equipment, investing in training employees, hiring new people. The optimism is like we've never seen before, and we got to keep it going. So this was the right approach for us to cut taxes, roll back regulations, and make it permanent for small businesses, individuals, and for companies. The economy is doing great, and Arizonans feel it every single day. This is what we've been able to do, but there's more to do.
Thank you. Moving on to our last question. I know we're running out of time. Congresswoman Sinema, this comes from one of our readers, viewers. With climate change, number one, do you believe that it is a man-made problem caused by humans? Number two, what are your plans in terms of combating climate change, particularly with regard to water and possible water shortages?
Well, I do believe that climate change is real. And I think it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to spend time debating how we got to the place that we are today. What does make sense is for individuals who have the ability to make a difference moving forward to work together to make that difference. And here in Arizona, water is of grave concern to our state. As a United States Senator, I'll hope to work with Senator Jon Kyl, who's been a leader on the issue of water during his time in the United States Senate. It's our duty to not only preserve our own water supply for the next 100 years, but to partner with states in the region, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, and California, to ensure that we have a regional strategy to move forward and protect our state in future years. It's working together Republicans and Democrats from these states across the region, that's how we'll find the solution to these challenges. But I firmly believe that as Arizonans, as Americans, we have the resources, we have the tools, we have the skills, and we have the knowledge. We can address issues of climate change together and do so without harming our business prospects and without harming what makes Arizona so amazing. You know, folks know this about me, but I'm an outdoor enthusiast. So every morning I get up and I go outside to either run, hike, bike, swim every day. And I want to make sure that we can protect that beauty, why we all love Arizona so much, for our future generations.
Ted and Maria, I can't believe this is the last question. I mean, we do have to address the issues of climate, and water is so important for Arizona. It's our lifeline. But I worked for Senator John Kyle when I was a legislative fellow as a major, and it's so important that we follow his lead, and he is my mentor to be able to move forward to address these really important issues. But we have to talk about the military. We have to talk about our veterans.
Quickly, please.
We haven't had any opportunity.
You have it right now.
Right, that's what brought me to Arizona, like 500,000 of our veterans, for our national security treasures that are here. I fought for to make sure that the A-10 was preserved, that we fight for Luke Air Force Base. My opponent advocated to shut down Luke Air Force Base. While we were in harm's way, she was protesting our troops in a pink tutu. And I'll tell you what, if these are not disqualifying enough, Kyrsten, what came out last week, CNN reported that in 2003, while she was on the radio, you said it was okay for Americans to join the Taliban to fight against us. You said you had no problem with that.
We're running out of time, but we have to let you respond to that.
I want to ask right now whether you're going to apologize to the veterans and me for saying it's okay to commit treason.
We are running out of time, so we got to get a response.
Well, we need a response because she owes us an apology.
Please.
Well, Martha has chosen to run a campaign like the one you're seeing right now,
where
she's engaging in ridiculous attacks and smearing my campaign. And she's just trying to cut, and not share the full picture. But the truth is that I've always fought for Arizona, and I have been proud to serve our state in elected office for over 13 years. Arizonans know me, and they know my record, and I've been honored to fight for them. Martha's trying to make this Senate campaign about me, but what we know is that this campaign is about everyday Arizonans, and I'll fight for them.
We have to stop it. We have to stop it right there. We got to stop it right there.
It's treason. And she also called us crazy here in Arizona.
It's the end of the debate.
Realcinema.com.
It's the end of the day. It's time now for closing statements. And we begin with Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema.
I know firsthand the challenges that everyday Arizonans face. I was born in Tucson, and my family went through some tough times. For a while, we were homeless. But my childhood taught me the importance of working hard and the importance of helping others. I've taken those values with me to Congress, where even in the midst of Washington chaos, I've been able to get stuff done and just solve problems for Arizonans. We passed the largest military raise for our military in a decade, and we blocked a raise for Congress. We've supported our veterans, fought for health care access, defended Medicare and Social Security. And I proudly worked with Senator John McCain to successfully protect $3.5 billion of funding for public education. I've been ranked the third most independent member of Congress because I work across the aisle to get things done. Arizonans deserve a leader in the United States Senate who will be a voice for all Arizonans, and I'd be honored to have your vote.
Thank you. For our final closing statement, we turn to Congresswoman Martha McSally.
Well, you know me as a fighter, but I want to make sure you know why I fight. I lost my dad when I was 12. I was sexually abused by a coach as a teenager. And these events nearly crushed me. But by the grace of God, I was propelled to a life of service, fighting for and protecting others, especially girls and women. There's a lot at stake in this election. You have a choice. The economy is on fire right now, and we're rebuilding our military. America is back, and Arizona is back. Thanks to President Trump, Governor Ducey, and the Republican House and Senate, there's more opportunity for everyone. So I want to keep fighting in the Senate, and you have a choice. Someone who wore the uniform or someone who protested our troops. Somebody who worked with Senator McCain to save the A-10 or advocated to shut down Luke. I'd ask you to look at both of our records. I believe and I fought for our country because I care about America, Arizona, and you. And I would be honored to have your vote because I believe everybody deserves a chance to succeed and to be kept safe.
All right. Thank you both, candidates.
Thank you.
And that is it.
Thank you so much.
For Election 2018 debate, this one for the U.S. Senate, brought to you by Arizona PBS and the Arizona Republic.
Again, thank you to the candidates for your participation, and thank you for watching. I'm Maria Paletta.
And I'm Ted Simons. Thanks again for joining us. You have a great evening.
A couple of debates.